The day before yesterday, I began explaining Citta-nupassana. Let's continue our study of Citta-nupassana today. The Buddha described the mind and its nature as Durangama, going far away. Here, going far away does not mean that the mind leaves the body and travels to places like Singapore or Malaysia. Rather, it means that objects from far away can appear in the mind. For example, if someone living in the USA has once visited the Sri Dagomba Pagoda in Myanmar, the image of the Sri Dagomba Pagoda can arise in their mind again. The mind has the ability to focus on objects that are far away, whether in space or in time. The ability is what is meant by the phrase, the mind goes far away. In reality, however, the mind never actually leaves the body. The next quality is ekajara. The mind arises one after another. Two minds never arise at the same time. We live with one mind at each moment. It is like a car tire touching the road, with only a small part of the tire in contact with the ground at any given moment. In the same way, we exist with only one mind at a time, never two minds together. However, because each mind arises and passes away so rapidly, we may mistakenly think that two or three minds arise simultaneously. Eka Citta Samayutta, we live with only one mind at a time. The next quality is asariram. The mind has no shape, no form, and no physical body. The next quality is Mahāsatipaṭṭhāna. The mind is said to dwell in the cave of the body. In reality, the mind does not physically exist inside the body. It arises only when an object and a sense base meet. However, because it arises again and again within the body, it is figuratively said that the mind dwells in the cave of the body. In truth, it does not exist there. For example, sound does not exist in a harp. Sound only appears when the harp strings are strung. There is no sound stored inside the body of the harp or in its strings. Let us consider another clear example. Is there fire inside a matchbox or a gas lighter? If a matchbox truly contains fire, placing it in your pocket would set you ablaze. Clearly, there is no fire inside the matchbox. There are conditions which produce fire. In the same way, the eye base, ear base, and other sense base do not contain citta mind. But when an object comes into contact with those bases, the necessary conditions cause the mind to arise at those bases. In other words, seeing that the mind exists in the cave of the body means that there are conditions that can give rise to mind in the body. In reality, the mind does not exist. Only when a beast and an object meet does the mind arise. The Buddha explained in the nature of the mind in these ways. In the Mahāsatipaṭṭhāna Sutta, the Buddha taught Citta-nupassana, the contemplation of the mind, to develop awareness of the mind which has these conditions. Citta-nupassana means the contemplation of the mind. One practicing contemplation of the mind, sati, mindfulness, and jnana, wisdom, must work together. However, sammaviriya, right effort, sammasankappa, right thought, and sammasamadhi, right concentration are also included. Without these factors, citta-nupassana cannot occur. When these factors are present and working together, it can truly be called citta-nupassana. Although the mind arises continuously, we are aware of only a few cittas, while countless others pass unnoticed. Rarely do we truly know our own mind. Instead, we are mostly aware of external objects, such as visible forms, sounds, and so on. Nowadays, people see something is beautiful or not beautiful based on what the eye sees. They say a sound is pleasant or unpleasant based on what the ear hears. They say a smell is good or bad based on what the nose smells. These statements only concern external objects. Saying this curry is delicious or this curry is tasteless refer to the taste sensed on the tongue. Saying this mattress is soft or this mattress is hard refers to a tangible object. Saying this air is cool or this air is hot also refers to a tangible object. Saying this weather is cool or this weather is hot is similarly about the tangible environment. None of these statements refer to the mind. Thus, we forgot about our mind and mostly talk about only external objects. To prevent this, the Buddha taught the practice of contemplation of our mind, citta-nupassana. Citta has the intrinsic nature of knowing an object. Therefore, despite the variety of mental states, they are ultimately all one type of mind in essence. The Buddha generally classified the mind into 16 types of mental states based on their prominent conditions. This does not mean that all 16 types arise in every individual, but rather that there are the possible categories of mental states that may arise. For instance, when speaking of cows, people often classify them by color, seeing how many red cows or how many black cows they have. In reality, both red and black cows are still cows. Yet, in conversation, they are categorized by color. In the same way, all 16 kinds are still mind, but they are divided into 16 categories because Each is accompanied by obvious conditions. Let's see the Pali and recite together. Katenjapana bhikkhave bhikkhu jete jetanupasi viharati. And how monks does a monk draw contemplating the mind as mind? Ida bhikkhave bhikkhu saragan va jetan saragan jetan dipajanati. Here, monks, when the mind has less, a monk clearly knows the mind has less. Here it is not the contemplation of less, but rather the contemplation of the mind that is affected by less. We contemplate less directly. If we contemplate less directly, it becomes Dhammanupassana. However, a meditator should not think this is Kayanupassana, this is Vedananupassana, this is Cetanupassana, or this is Dhammanupassana. Thinking in this way during meditation leads to missing the actual object being observed. We should avoid such thinking. Instead, we must simply contemplate the object as it is being noted, without distraction. At times, we may observe Vedana, feeling. At other times, Kaya, the body, Ceta, the mind, or Dhamma object, mental phenomena. The Buddha taught these four kinds of objects as suitable for everyone to observe. We cannot decide in advance. I will note only Ceta and not Vedana. When meditating, sometimes a mental object will appear, sometimes a feeling will appear. Whatever object arises, we need to know it as it appears in the mind. In other words, only mind should be alert to any object that comes. Contemplation of the in-breath and out-breath is a practice of Kayanupassana, mindfulness of the body. However, Vedana, feeling, Ceta, mind, and Dhamma object, mental phenomena, may also arise along with it. Do not try to analyze or separate them. Simply observe whatever object is present in the mind, in the moment. For beginners, staying with the present object is often difficult, but with repeated and patient practice, it gradually becomes easier. For example, when a child first learns to walk, he falls down again and again. Later, through continued practice, he no longer falls, he can even run. Eventually, he can dance or balance on one leg. It all depends on practice. Consider also a juggler who plays with 10 balls, alternating between raising and catching them with each hand. With skill and practice, not a single ball falls. Likewise, if one develops vipassana practice, we can contemplate any object and catch any Dhamma nature that appears in the mind at any time. When sati, mindfulness, samadhi, concentration, and panya, wisdom, become strong, we can observe any object that arises. If we fail, we simply try again without disappointment, without giving up. We must persevere until we can observe whatever object appears. While contemplating the mind, we should see it along with its obvious conditions. As mentioned earlier, counts are all the same in being counts, but they are distinguished by their colors, red, black, and so on. In the same way, all minds have the same nature of knowing the object. But by recognizing their obvious conditions, we can identify the mental state of the mind. The Buddha taught 16 mental states that are clearly distinguished from one another. Let us now consider the first citta. Saragam va cittam, saragam cittam dipajjanati. When the mind has lust, a monk clearly knows the mind has lust. Those who have studied the Abhidhamma will know that a lustful mind refers to the 8 lobha mula citta. However, during meditation, one should not think about the 8 lobha mula citta in a technical way. Simply recognize the mind affected by lust as the mind with lust. When one knows the mind with lust as the mind with lust, one naturally understands that it is unwholesome, akusala. Upon recognizing it, there will be a natural inclination not to hold on to this unwholesome state, but also without resisting it, simply acknowledge it and fully accept it. In this moment, the mind is with lust. On the contrary, the Buddha taught the second citta. Vitaragam va cittam, vitaragam cittam dipajjanati. When the mind is without lust, a monk clearly knows the mind is without lust. We should note that all citta are commonly in cittanupassana or lokiya citta, worldly consciousness. Not lokuttara citta, supramundane consciousness. Why? Because lokuttara citta is not the type of mind we contemplate in vipassana. It is simply the mind of attainment. In our daily lives, we do not experience lokuttara citta. If we attempt to contemplate an object we do not actually have, it becomes mere imagination. And imagination is not the object of vipassana. Here, Vitaraga citta refers to Dosa mula citta, Moha mula citta, and the remaining Lokiya citta. This is just for informational purpose. Those who have not studied the Abhidhamma will not understand it, and even those who have, if they think too much about Abhidhamma theory during practice, it will disturb their vipassana. No interpretation, no judgment, simply recognize in the present moment. mind with lust as mind with lust, and mind without lust as mind without lust. This is one set of mental sticks. The next set of minds is as thus. Sado samva jaitam, sado sam jaitanti pajanati, vidado samva jaitam, vidado sam jaitanti pajanati. When the mind has hate, a monk clearly knows the mind has hate. When the mind is without hate, a monk clearly knows the mind is without hate. Samoham va jaitam, samoham jaitanti majanati. Veda moham va jaitam, veda moham jaitanti majanati. When the mind has delusion, a monk clearly knows the mind has delusion. When the mind is without delusion, a monk clearly knows the mind is without delusion. Samkhedam va jaitam, sankhedam jaitanti pajanati. Vaikedam va jaitam, vaikedam jaitanti pajanati. When the mind is contracted, a monk clearly knows the mind is contracted. When the mind is distracted, a monk clearly knows the mind is distracted. Sankheta means a contracted mind which occurs when sloth, tina, and topa metta arise. Such a mind lacks interest in the object. For example, when students listen to a lecture and begin to fall sleepy, their minds become contracted. A citta accompanied by tina and metta is called samkheta citta. This contracted mind can also arise during meditation. Vaikita citta means a distracted mind. This type of mind cannot remain on one object, but keeps and wandering here and there. Vaikita citta is a citta accompanied by uddhacca, restlessness. Let's go to the next set of citta. When a meditator practices samatha and attains jhana, that citta is considered a noble mind because it is higher than kama citta. Such a mind is called Mahāgata citta. When one contemplates vipassana on Mahāgata citta, Mahāgata va citta, Mahāgata cittanti pajanati. When the mind is exhausted, a monk clearly knows the mind is exhausted. So jhana consciousness is called an exhausted mind, Mahāgata citta. If he does not arrive to the state of jhana, amahagata va citta, amahagata cittanti pajanati. When the mind is unexhausted, a monk clearly knows the mind is unexhausted. Amahagata citta means kamavajara citta, the sensual sphere of consciousness. The next sex is Sauttara and Anuttara citta. Sauttara means having something higher or surpassable. It refers to a lower type of consciousness, especially Kamavajara citta, One compared to higher level such as Rupavajara and Arupavajara citta. Anuttara, on the other hand, means unsurpassable or without anything higher. For instance, when Rupavajara citta is compared to Arupavajara citta, the Rupavajara citta is considered Sauttara and the Arupavajara citta is Anuttara. Although the term Anuttara is sometimes used to describe the unsurpassable nature of Lokuttara citta, that meaning does not apply here. It is because Lokuttara citta is not an object of vipassana contemplation. This highlights the importance of defining terms carefully. For instance, some people define sankhara as volitional activity because they have seen it used in the phrase avijja paccaya sankhara. However, in sabbe sankhara anicca, it no longer means volitional activity, but rather conditioned things. In sankhara khanda, it means mental formations. So also, the word upekkha is translated as indifferent feeling, one referring to an ordinary state, whereas it is translated as equanimity, one referring to the jhana state. The word is the same, but the meaning changes depending on the context. This can happen in any language, and without skill in understanding definitions, one can easily misunderstand. Here, Anuttara refers to Mahāgata citta. Those who have not attained jhana cannot contemplate this type of mind. Let's go to see Pali and recite together. Sauttaram va cittam, Sauttaram cittam di bhajanati. Anuttaram va cittam, Anuttaram cittam di bhajanati. When the mind is surpassable, a monk clearly knows the mind is surpassable. When the mind is unsurpassable, a man clearly knows the mind is unsurpassable. The next set of citta is samahita and asamahita. Samahita citta means concentrated mind. All associated Dhamma cetasika are focused on a single object, so it is called samahita citta. In general, a mind that is calm, steady, and composed is referred to as a samahita citta. Asamahita citta means unconcentrated mind, a mind that is unstable and unfocused. Let us look at the Pali and recite together. Samahitam va cittam, Samahitam cittam di bhajanati. Asamahitam va cittam, Asamahitam cittam di bhajanati. When the mind is concentrated, a man clearly knows the mind is concentrated. When the mind is unconcentrated, a monk clearly knows the mind is unconcentrated. The next set of citta is vimutta citta and avimutta citta. Vimutta citta means liberated mind. There are 5 kinds of vimutti: liberated, tadinga vimutti, vikambana vimutti, samujjeta vimutti, Patipassati vimutti, and Nisarana vimutti. Tathanga Vimukti means deliverance by substitution of opposites, which is a temporary liberation based on a corresponding cause. For example, if one sees a nature impermanent, one is liberated from the perception of nature permanent. If one sees dukkha, suffering, one is liberated from the perception of sukha, happiness. If one sees anatta, non-self, one is liberated from the perception of atta, self. If one can discriminate nama and rupa, mentality and materiality, one is free from sakkaya ditthi, personality view. Vaikambana Vimukti means deliverance by removal of suppression for a while from the nivarana hindrances. This is a temporary liberation achieved by suppressing the hindrances. Later, when the force of concentration declines, the nivarana hindrances will return. For example, imagine a lake covered with algae. When someone wants to collect water from the lake using a pot, they push the algae aside by moving the pot through the water. The algae move away temporarily, allowing clear water to be taken. However, after a short while, the algae return to cover the surface again. In the same way, deliverance for a short period through suppression is called Vaikambana Vimukti. Samucceda Vimukti means deliverance by cutting off. This occurs through Megajeta, the path consciousness, and is permanent. The defilements will never arise again. But Patipasati Vimukti is deliverance by coming, brought about by Palajeta, the fruition consciousness. This can be compared to a fire that has been extinguished but still radiates heat. To remove the heat completely, water must be poured over it. Similarly, the Megajeta, the path consciousness, extinguish the kilesa defilements so that they no longer arise, but the heat of the kilesa still remains. Palajeta then completely extinguished this heat of the kilesa. This is called Patipasati Vimukti. Nissarana Vimukti is Nibbana, the ultimate deliverance that is entirely free from all kilesa. Among the 5 kinds of Vimukti, only 2, Tathanga Vimukti and Vaikambana Vimukti, are taken as the object of contemplation in Cittanupassana. The other 3, Samucceda Vimukti, Patipasati Vimukti, and Nissarana Vimukti, are the result of successful Vipassana practice and are not the object of Vipassana contemplation. Let's see the Pali and recite together. Vimodam va jaitam, vimodam jaitam di bhajanati. Avimodam va jaitam, avimodam jaitam di bhajanati. When the mind is liberated, a monk clearly knows the mind is liberated. When the mind is unliberated, a man clearly knows the mind is unliberated. The Buddha taught the states of mind can be classified into 16 kinds. When we practice Cittanupassana, it is necessary to contemplate the mind that arises in us. There is no need to observe these 16 types in serial order. In the course of Cittanupassana practice, we will naturally come to recognize the state of mind as the outcome. When we know the states of mind together with the mind's characteristic, we proceed to contemplate the vipassana in this way. Just as the mind arises in me in this manner, so too does the mind arise in other in the same way. Let's look at the Pali sentence and recite together. Iti ejjadam va citte cittanupassī viharati. In this way, he draws contemplating the mind as mind internally. Baheda va citte cittanupassī viharati. Or he draws contemplating the mind as mind externally. Ajata baheda va citte cittanupassī viharati. Or he draws contemplating the mind as mind both internally and externally. By doing so repeatedly, he will see the characteristic of arising and passing away. When he sees those characteristics, samudaya dhammanupassīva citta samain viharati. So too, he draws contemplating the nature of arising in mind. Vaya dhammanupassīva citta samain viharati. Or he draws contemplating the nature of passing away in mind. Samudaya vaya dhammanupassīva citta samain viharati. Or he draws contemplating the nature of both arising and passing away in mind. By contemplating those characteristics again and again, vipassana jnana is gradually improved and finally sorry, I do late. Atti caitanti va panassa satipaccupattita hoti. Moreover, this mindfulness is established with the thought. There is only the mind. Java deva jnana mattaya patesati mattaya. Such mindfulness serves to develop further knowledge and awareness. Anesitoja viharati. He draws independent and naja kenji loke upadiyati without being attached to anything in the world. Evam bhikkhā bhikkhave bhikkhu citte cittanupassī viharati. These two monks is how a monk draws contemplating the mind as mind. If one is clinging, worry, will also be present. When there is no clinging, worry disappears. People often say, I worry a lot. This is because they are clinging. If one can remain free from tanha and ditthi without clinging to anything, how wonderful would it be? Even without clinging, we can still live together in harmony and it will be very peaceful. To remove clinging, we must repeatedly contemplate the mind with sati, viriya, and jnana. By knowing reality as they really are, we can be free from clinging in accordance with the Buddha's teaching. Now let's go to contemplation of mind object, Dhammanupassana. The Buddha taught all kinds of objects of contemplation in Mahāsatipaṭṭhāna Sutta, dividing them into 4 sessions. For the contemplation of bodily phenomena, he taught Kayanupassana. For the contemplation of feeling, he taught Vedananupassana, which is of great importance in the continuum of beings. Moreover, since beings are led by the mind, he taught Chaitanupassana, the contemplation of consciousness, to see reality as it is. Finally, for the contemplation of the remaining phenomena, mind objects, he taught Dhammanupassana. In this way, the Buddha included all Dhamma within the Mahāsatipaṭṭhāna Sutta. Nothing is left out from the practice of contemplation. In summary, there are ultimately only 2 kinds of objects to be contemplated: rupa, material phenomena, and nama, mental phenomena. Kayanupassana is rupa patikkaha, the contemplation of rupa. Vedananupassana and Cittanupassana are nama patikkaha, the contemplation of nama. The Buddha taught Dhammanupassana as the contemplation of both rupa and nama. In view of 5 khandha, the Buddha taught rupa khandha as Kayanupassana, Vedana khandha as Vedananupassana, Vijnana khandha as Cittanupassana, and Sanya khandha and Sankhara khandha as Dhammanupassana. Thus, they can ultimately be reduced to just 2: rupa patikkaha, contemplation of mind, contemplation of rupa, and nama patikkaha, contemplation of nama. When practicing vipassana, one must contemplate real rupa and nama object as the object of vipassana. What is real rupa? There are 28 kinds of rupa, 18 nibbana rupa, and 10 anibbana rupa. Nibbana rupa are real rupa produced by causes kama, citta, uddu, and ahara. Anibbana rupa are rupa associated with nibbana rupa, but not produced by those causes. They are not real rupa. Therefore, only the 18 nibbana rupa, real rupa, are object of vipassana. This is called Rupa Paticcaha. In Nama Paticcaha, only Lokiya Nama are object of Vipassana. The Buddha taught Dhammanupassana divided into 5 sessions. Do you remember how many sessions are in Kayanupassana? 14 sessions. For Vedana, although it is classified into 9 kinds, Vedananupassana counts as only 1 session. Likewise, although Citta are divided into 16 kinds, Cittanupassana is also counted as only 1 session. Dhammanupassana, however, is separated into 5 sessions. Altogether, the Buddha taught 21 sessions in the Mahāsatipaṭṭhāna Sutta, but if we count by kinds, 9 kinds of Vedana and 16 kinds of Citta, there are 44 kinds of object in total. Now let's go to Dhammanupassana. The word Dhamma has a very broad range of meanings. Because it is so wide, its meaning in any discussion should be confined to a specific context. Otherwise, the true sense may be lost. In brief, the essence of Dhamma is Nisatta, soulless, and Nijjiva, lifeless. Because people tend to believe that the realities occurring in the continuum of beings constitute a soul or a life. In truth, there is no soul and no life in that sense. Dhamma refers to ultimate realities, each possessing its own distinct characteristic. In this way, everything is covered under the term Dhamma. For example, Kusala, wholesome, is Dhamma. Akusala, unwholesome, is Dhamma. Vipaka, Kiriya, and Rupa are also Dhamma. Nibbana is Dhamma as well. Even Pinyati concept is considered Dhamma. As the phrase says, Salakhanan Dharititi Dhammo. That which bears its own characteristic is called Dhamma. In this sense, the term Dhamma covers all phenomena, such as Kusala Dhamma, Akusala Dhamma, and Abhyagata Dhamma, which include Vipaka, Kiriya, Rupa, and Nibbana. However, in the formula Dhamman Saranang Gacchami, I take refuge in the Dhamma. The word Dhamma does not include everything. Here it refers especially to the 4 parts, Mega, the 4 fruits, fruition, Phala, and Nibbana. The meaning is expressed in the phrase Chatusu Apayesu Abadamani Dharititi Dhammo. One who upholds these Dhamma will not fall into the 4 lower realms, Apaya. In Dhammanupassana, the Dhamma refers to Rupa and Nama, which are divided into 5 sessions. In the first session, the Buddha taught the 5 hindrances Dhammanupassana Nivarana Pabba. The day after tomorrow, we will study about this. Let's stop our study for today. Is there any question? If no question, let's stop. And we share our merit we have done today to all living beings by reciting Idame Punya. Together, Idame Punya Asawakya Wahan Hodu Idame Punya Nibbanasa Pachayo Hodu Mama Punya Bhagam Sabha Satanam Bhajimi Te Sabi Mi Sama Punya Bhaga Labantu Sadhu Sadhu Sadhu